Jake Morrison had been working on Horizon 7 station for 3 months, and he still wasn't used to seeing so many different aliens in one place. The diplomatic station orbited a small moon far from Earth, and it served as neutral ground where dozens of species could meet and talk. Jake's job was simple: help humans and aliens understand each other better. He was a cultural liaison officer, which mostly meant he attended boring meetings and tried not to accidentally insult anyone. Tonight was another reception, the kind that happened almost every week. Different species gathered in the main hall, talking in small groups, drinking strange beverages and pretending to enjoy themselves. Jake wore his formal uniform, the dark blue one with the Earth insignia on the shoulder. He held a glass of water and tried to look like he belonged there. The hall was impressive, with tall windows showing the stars outside and soft lighting that changed colors to make everyone comfortable. Humans liked yellow light, but some aliens preferred green or purple, so the station computers mixed everything together. The result was a weird rainbow effect that gave Jake a headache if he looked at it too long. He spotted his supervisor, Linda Hayes, across the room. She was talking to a group of tall, thin aliens with too many arms. Linda caught his eye and nodded. Everything was going smoothly so far. No diplomatic incidents, no cultural misunderstandings. Just another boring evening. Then Jake saw her. She stood near the windows, slightly apart from the other guests. She was tall, maybe 6.5 feet, with long limbs and graceful movements. Her skin was pale, almost white, but it wasn't quite skin. It seemed to glow from within, and patterns of light moved across her arms and neck like living tattoos. The patterns were beautiful, shifting from blue to purple to green, creating designs that reminded Jake of northern lights back on Earth. She was alone, looking out at the stars with an expression Jake couldn't quite read. She seemed sad, or maybe just thoughtful. Most aliens at these receptions stayed in groups, talking to their own kind, but this one stood by herself. Jake made a decision. It was probably stupid, but he was tired of standing around doing nothing. He walked over to her, careful not to move too quickly. He'd learned that fast movements scared some species. "Hi," he said when he got close. "Mind if I join you?" She turned to look at him, and Jake got his first good look at her face. She had large eyes, darker than human eyes, and delicate features. The glowing patterns on her skin extended up her neck to her cheeks. When she saw him, the patterns flickered, changing from blue to a lighter purple. "You are human," she said. Her voice was soft and musical, with an accent Jake couldn't place. "Guilty as charged," Jake said with a smile. "I'm Jake Morrison. I work here as a cultural liaison." "I am Lyra," she said. She didn't offer a last name. "I am Vareth. I work as an engineer." "Nice to meet you, Lyra." Jake gestured to the window. "Beautiful view, isn't it?" "Yes," she said simply. She seemed uncomfortable, but Jake couldn't tell if it was because of him or just the social situation in general. They stood in silence for a moment. Jake tried to think of something to say. He wasn't great at small talk, but his job required him to at least try. He looked at the patterns moving across her arms, the way they shifted and changed like they were alive. "Those patterns on your skin," Jake said. "They're really beautiful. They remind me of auroras we have back on Earth. You know, the northern lights? I saw them once when I was a kid, and they looked just like that. All those colors moving and dancing." He meant it as a simple compliment, the kind humans gave each other all the time. It was just something nice to say, a way to start a conversation. But the moment the words left his mouth, he knew something was wrong. Lyra went completely still. The patterns on her skin flashed bright white, then cycled rapidly through every color Jake could imagine. Her eyes went wide and her mouth opened slightly. She stared at him like he'd just said something impossible. She started to say, but no other words came out. "Are you okay?" Jake asked, suddenly worried. "Did I say something wrong?" But Lyra didn't answer. She turned and walked away quickly, almost running. Jake watched her disappear into the crowd, leaving him standing alone by the window with no idea what had just happened. Jake looked around to see if anyone else had noticed. A few aliens were watching him, and they didn't look happy. One of them, another Varath with silver patterns instead of blue, was staring at him with an expression that might have been shock or anger. Jake couldn't tell. Linda appeared at his elbow a moment later. "What did you just do?" she asked quietly. "I have no idea," Jake said honestly. "I just complimented her patterns. I said they were beautiful." Linda's face went pale. Oh no, Jake, the Verath are very private about personal comments. You might have just caused a problem. What kind of problem? I don't know yet. But we're about to find out. A tall Verath male was walking toward them. He wore a formal robe covered in symbols Jake didn't recognize. His patterns glowed a deep red, which probably wasn't a good sign. I am Commander Thane, the alien said when he reached them. I represent the Verath delegation. We need to discuss what just happened between your officer and our engineer. Of course, Linda said smoothly. I'm sure this is just a misunderstanding. Perhaps, Thane said. His patterns flickered. But misunderstandings can have consequences. We will need to meet formally tomorrow morning. Please bring Officer Morrison. Absolutely, Linda said. Thane nodded and walked away. Jake and Linda stood in silence for a moment. Am I in trouble? Jake asked. I don't know, Linda said. But whatever you did, it was significant. The Verath don't request formal meetings over nothing. Jake looked toward the crowd where Lyra had disappeared. He still had no idea what he'd done wrong. He'd just given her a compliment. How could that possibly cause an international incident? But as the reception continued around him, Jake couldn't shake the image of Lyra's face when he'd spoken to her. She hadn't looked angry. She'd looked shocked, yes, but also something else. Something Jake couldn't quite identify. He had a feeling tomorrow's meeting was going to be very interesting. Jake Morrison had been working on Horizon 7 station for 3 months, and he still wasn't used to seeing so many different aliens in one place. The diplomatic station orbited a small moon far from Earth, and it served as neutral ground where dozens of species could meet and talk. Jake's job was simple: help humans and aliens understand each other better. He was a cultural liaison officer, which mostly meant he attended boring meetings and tried not to accidentally insult anyone. Tonight was another reception, the kind that happened almost every week. Different species gathered in the main hall, talking in small groups, drinking strange beverages and pretending to enjoy themselves. Jake wore his formal uniform, the dark blue one with the Earth insignia on the shoulder. He held a glass of water and tried to look like he belonged there. The hall was impressive, with tall windows showing the stars outside and soft lighting that changed colors to make everyone comfortable. Humans liked yellow light, but some aliens preferred green or purple, so the station computers mixed everything together. The result was a weird rainbow effect that gave Jake a headache if he looked at it too long. He spotted his supervisor, Linda Hayes, across the room. She was talking to a group of tall, thin aliens with too many arms. Linda caught his eye and nodded. Everything was going smoothly so far. No diplomatic incidents, no cultural misunderstandings. Just another boring evening. Then Jake saw her. She stood near the windows, slightly apart from the other guests. She was tall, maybe 6.5 feet, with long limbs and graceful movements. Her skin was pale, almost white, but it wasn't quite skin. It seemed to glow from within, and patterns of light moved across her arms and neck like living tattoos. The patterns were beautiful, shifting from blue to purple to green, creating designs that reminded Jake of northern lights back on Earth. She was alone, looking out at the stars with an expression Jake couldn't quite read. She seemed sad, or maybe just thoughtful. Most aliens at these receptions stayed in groups, talking to their own kind, but this one stood by herself. Jake made a decision. It was probably stupid, but he was tired of standing around doing nothing. He walked over to her, careful not to move too quickly. He'd learned that fast movements scared some species. "Hi," he said when he got close. "Mind if I join you?" She turned to look at him, and Jake got his first good look at her face. She had large eyes, darker than human eyes, and delicate features. The glowing patterns on her skin extended up her neck to her cheeks. When she saw him, the patterns flickered, changing from blue to a lighter purple. "You are human," she said. Her voice was soft and musical, with an accent Jake couldn't place. "Guilty as charged," Jake said with a smile. "I'm Jake Morrison. I work here as a cultural liaison." "I am Lyra," she said. She didn't offer a last name. "I am Verath. I work as an engineer." "Nice to meet you, Lyra." Jake gestured to the window. "Beautiful view, isn't it?" "Yes," she said simply. She seemed uncomfortable, but Jake couldn't tell if it was because of him or just the social situation in general. They stood in silence for a moment. Jake tried to think of something to say. He wasn't great at small talk, but his job required him to at least try. Jake couldn't sleep that night. He kept thinking about Lyra's face, the way her patterns had flashed white and then cycled through every color. He kept replaying the moment in his head, trying to figure out what he'd done wrong. It had seemed so innocent at the time. Just a simple compliment. He got up early and went straight to the station's library. Well, it wasn't really a library in the traditional sense. It was a massive database accessible through terminals scattered around the station. Jake found an empty terminal in a quiet corner and started searching for information about the Verath. What he found was frustrating. There was plenty of technical information about Verath technology and their contributions to the Galactic Coalition, but very little about their culture. The Verath were private, the database said. They kept to themselves. They were brilliant engineers and scientists, but they didn't socialize much with other species. Jake dug deeper, looking for anything about Verath social customs. After an hour of searching, he found a short article written by a xenoanthropologist. It mentioned that the Verath were emotionally reserved, and that their bioluminescent patterns were connected to their emotional state. But the article didn't say what different colors meant or how to interpret them. Having trouble? A voice said behind him. Jake turned and saw a strange alien standing there. The being had 4 arms, gray skin, and large eyes that seemed to see everything. Jake recognized the species as a Keller, though he'd never actually talked to one before. Yeah, Jake admitted. I think I accidentally insulted someone last night, and I'm trying to figure out what I did wrong. The Keller moved closer, his 4 arms gesturing in a way that seemed friendly. I am Kel. I work as an archivist here. I could not help but overhear your search queries. You are researching the Verath? Yes, I complimented a Verath woman last night and she ran away. Now her people want a formal meeting and I have no idea what I did. Kel's eyes widened slightly. You complimented her? What exactly did you say? Jake explained the whole encounter, including his comment about Lyra's patterns. As he spoke, Kel's expression changed from curious to something like amazement. Oh my, Kel said softly. You did not insult her. You did something much more complicated. What do you mean? Kel sat down at the terminal next to Jake, using 2 of his arms to pull up files while the other 2 gestured as he spoke. The Verath are very different from humans. They do not express emotions openly. Personal compliments are rare in their culture, especially between strangers. And compliments about physical appearance are even more rare. Okay, Jake said. So I was too forward. I get that. No, you do not understand. Kel pulled up an image of Verath writing. In Verath culture, commenting on someone's bioluminescent patterns is not just a compliment. It is a declaration of deep personal interest. What you said to her would be similar to a human proposing marriage on a first meeting. Jake felt his stomach drop. What? The patterns are considered deeply personal. They reflect inner emotions. To comment on them is to say that you are interested in that person's inner life, their emotional state, their true self. It is the most intimate thing one Verath can say to another. But I didn't know, Jake said weakly. Of course you did not. How could you? But she does not know that. From her perspective, a human stranger just declared romantic intentions toward her in the most direct way possible. Jake put his head in his hands. This is a disaster. Perhaps, Kel said thoughtfully. Or perhaps it is something interesting. The Verath requested a meeting, yes? If they were truly offended, they would have simply filed a formal complaint and avoided you. Instead, they want to talk. That suggests they are curious. Curious about what? About whether you meant it. About human courtship customs. About many things, I imagine. Kel leaned back. The Verath are not an angry people. They are cautious and formal, but not cruel. If you are honest with them and explain the misunderstanding, they will likely accept your apology. Jake felt slightly better, but only slightly. He still had to face Lyra and explain that he'd accidentally proposed to her. The thought made him want to crawl into a hole and hide. Meanwhile, in another part of the station, Lyra was having her own crisis. She sat in her quarters, staring at the wall. Her friend Mira sat across from her, patterns glowing with concern. He actually said that? Mira asked. A human you just met commented on your patterns? Yes, Lyra said quietly. Her own patterns were flickering between blue and purple, unable to settle on one color. He said they were beautiful. He compared them to something from his homeworld. That is... Mira struggled for words. Lyra, you know what that means. He declared interest in you. Very direct interest, I know, Lyra said. But he is human. Perhaps humans do not understand what that means to us. Then he spoke in ignorance. You should report this and forget about it. But Lyra couldn't forget about it. She kept thinking about Jake's face when he'd spoken to her. He had smiled, warm and genuine. His eyes had been kind. No one had ever looked at her like that before. In Varath society, everyone was so formal, so careful with their words and expressions. But this human had been open, honest, direct. It had terrified her. But it had also been exciting in a way she didn't fully understand. What if he meant it? Lyra asked suddenly. Mira stared at her. You cannot be serious. You just met him. And he is human. Not even the same species, I know. But what if he did mean it? What if humans are just more open about these things? Then he is foolish, Mira said firmly. Lyra, you are being emotional. This is not like you. Lyra knew Mira was right. She was being emotional. The Varath prided themselves on logic and rationality. Emotions were acknowledged but controlled, never allowed to dominate decisions. But something about Jake's compliment had stirred feelings Lyra didn't know she had. For the first time in her life, someone had seen her patterns and called them beautiful. Not useful or efficient or well-controlled. Beautiful. As if she were something worth admiring just for existing. The formal meeting happened at 10 in the morning, in a conference room with chairs designed for multiple species. Jake sat on one side of the table with Linda. Across from them sat Commander Thane and two other Varath officials, and Lyra. She sat at the end of the table, her patterns a carefully controlled pale blue. She didn't look at Jake. Let us begin, Thane said formally. Officer Morrison, you made a personal comment to Engineer Lyra last night. We need to understand your intentions. Jake took a deep breath. I apologize. I didn't understand what my words meant in your culture. In human culture, compliments are casual. We give them to strangers all the time. I thought I was just being friendly. Thane's patterns flickered. So you did not intend to declare romantic interest? No, Jake said honestly. I had just met her. I was just trying to start a conversation. There was silence. Then surprisingly, Lyra spoke. You give compliments to strangers? She asked softly, freely without deeper meaning. Jake looked at her. Yes, it's just something we do. If we think something is nice, we say so. Lyra's patterns shifted to a lighter shade. That sounds wonderful, she said quietly. The formal meeting ended with an understanding. Jake had acted in ignorance, not malice. The Varath delegation accepted his apology. Everything was resolved. Jake should have felt relieved, but instead he felt disappointed. The meeting had been so formal, so stiff. Lyra had barely looked at him, and when it was over, she'd left quickly with the other Varath. He went back to his regular duties, but he couldn't stop thinking about her. Not because of any romantic interest, he told himself. He was just curious. He wanted to understand why she'd said his culture sounded wonderful when he'd explained about casual compliments. 3 days later, Jake was in the station's observation deck during his lunch break. The observation deck was one of his favorite places. It was a large room with windows on all sides giving a full view of space. Few people came here during the day, which made it perfect for thinking. He was eating a sandwich and watching the stars when he heard footsteps behind him. He turned and saw Lyra standing there, looking uncertain. Hi, Jake said, surprised. Lyra, right? Yes. She moved closer slowly, like she was approaching a wild animal. Her patterns were shifting between blue and green. I hope I am not interrupting. Not at all. Jake gestured to the empty space beside him. Want to join me? She hesitated, then sat down on a bench a few feet away. Not close, but not far either. They sat in awkward silence for a moment. I wanted to apologize, Lyra said finally, for running away at the reception. That was rude of me. You don't need to apologize, Jake said. I'm the one who made things weird. I didn't know what my words meant to your people. You could not have known. Our cultures are very different, she paused. May I ask you something? Sure. At the meeting you said humans give compliments freely. Is that really true? You tell strangers they are beautiful? Well, maybe not beautiful exactly, Jake said. That might be too much. But we tell people if we like their clothes or their hair or their smile. Small things. It's just being nice. Lyra's patterns brightened. We do not do that. In Varath culture, personal comments are reserved for close relationships, family, perhaps a bonded partner. But strangers? Never. That sounds lonely, Jake said before he could stop himself. Lyra looked at him sharply, but her patterns didn't darken. Instead, they glowed brighter. "Yes," she said softly. "It is." They sat in silence again, but this time it felt more comfortable. Jake finished his sandwich while Lyra looked out at the stars. "Can I ask you something now?" Jake said. "Yes." "Why did you come find me? You could have just let things end with the formal meeting." Lyra was quiet for a long time. When she spoke, her voice was almost a whisper. "Because no one has ever spoken to me the way you did. In my entire life, no one has ever looked at me and said something kind just because they wanted to. Everything in my culture is measured, controlled, formal. But you were just honest. It frightened me, but it also made me curious. Curious about what? About humans. About how you can be so open. About what it must be like to live in a culture where people freely express kindness." Jake smiled. "It's not always great. Sometimes people say mean things too, just as freely. But yeah, I guess we do wear our hearts on our sleeves." "That is a human expression?" "Yeah, it means we show our emotions openly." "I like it," Lyra said. Her patterns glowed warm gold. "I wish my people could do that." Over the next few weeks, Jake and Lyra started meeting regularly in the observation deck. At first, it was just during lunch breaks. Lyra would bring her work tablet and sit nearby while Jake ate. They didn't always talk, but the silence was comfortable. Gradually, they began having real conversations. Jake told her about Earth, about oceans and forests and cities. He told her about human customs, about birthday parties and holidays and dancing. Lyra listened with fascination, her patterns glowing with interest. In return, Lyra told Jake about the Vareth homeworld, about their massive cities built with mathematical precision, about their achievements in engineering and science. But she also told him about the loneliness of growing up in a culture that discouraged emotional expression. "I was always told that emotions were primitive," Lyra said one day. "That advanced species control their feelings through logic and discipline. But watching humans, I wonder if that is true. You feel things deeply, but you are not primitive. You build amazing things. You explore the galaxy. You form alliances with species very different from yourselves." "Maybe emotions aren't a weakness," Jake said. "Maybe they're what make life worth living." Lyra's patterns flickered through several colors, settling on a warm purple. "I have never thought about it that way." Their friendship became known around the station. Other humans would see them together and give Jake curious looks. The Varath delegation noticed too, and they didn't seem happy about it. Jake would sometimes catch Vareth officials watching them with disapproval. Their patterns dark red. Kel the archivist approached Jake one day in the hallway. "You are playing a dangerous game." "My friend," Kel said with his four-armed gesture that meant concern. "What do you mean?" "The Varath do not approve of emotional attachments formed quickly. They especially do not approve of their people forming friendships with other species, particularly humans. You are seen as a bad influence and we're just friends," Jake protested. "We talk, that's all." "To the Varath, there is no such thing as just friends," Kel said. "Every relationship has meaning and purpose. A friendship without clear boundaries or formal structure is chaos to them." Jake frowned. "So what are you saying? That I should stop talking to her?" "I am saying be careful. The Varath value order above all else. If they believe you are disrupting their social harmony, they will act." Jake didn't tell Lyra about this conversation, but he noticed that she seemed more nervous at their next meeting. Her patterns kept flickering between colors, unable to settle. "Is something wrong?" Jake asked. "Commander Thane spoke to me," Lyra said quietly. "He asked why I spend so much time with you. He said it is inappropriate for a Vareth to form casual attachments." "What did you tell him?" "I told him you are helping me understand human culture, that it is educational." She paused. "That was not completely honest. This is not just educational for me." "What is it then?" Jake asked. Lyra's pattern shifted to a color Jake had never seen before, a deep blue mixed with gold. "I do not know the word in your language. It is something I have never felt before. When I am with you, I feel like I can be myself, like I do not have to control every word and expression." "Is that what friendship feels like?" Jake felt something tighten in his chest. "Yeah," he said softly. "That's exactly what friendship feels like." "Then I am glad we are friends," Lyra said. She smiled, a gesture she'd learned from watching humans. It looked strange on her alien face, but it was genuine. The trouble started on a Tuesday morning. Jake was in his office reviewing reports when Linda called him in for an urgent meeting. Her expression was serious, and Jake's stomach sank. "The Varath High Council has sent a formal complaint," Linda said. sliding a data pad across her desk. "They're concerned about your relationship with engineer Lyra." Jake picked up the pad and read through the formal language. The gist was clear. The Vareth believed Jake was having a negative emotional influence on Lyra. They wanted the friendship to end immediately. "This is ridiculous," Jake said. "We just talk, we're friends." "I know," Linda said. "But the Vareth don't see it that way. They've sent Commander Thane with expanded authority. He's here to investigate and possibly recall Lyra to their homeworld. They can't do that. She's an adult. She can make her own choices." Linda gave him a sad look. In Varath culture, individual choice is less important than social harmony. If the council decides she's being corrupted by human influence, they absolutely can recall her. Jake felt anger rising in his chest. "So what am I supposed to do? Just stop talking to her? Pretend we were never friends?" "I don't know, Jake. But you need to be careful. This could turn into a real diplomatic problem." Jake left Linda's office feeling frustrated and helpless. He went to the observation deck hoping to clear his head. But when he got there, Lyra was already waiting for him. Her patterns were dark, flickering between blue and black. "You heard," Jake said. "Yes. Commander Thane informed me this morning. He ordered me to cease all contact with you." They stood in silence, looking out at the stars. Jake wanted to say something comforting, but he didn't know what. "I do not want to stop seeing you," Lyra said quietly. "These past weeks have been the happiest of my life. For the first time, I feel like I can be honest about who I am. But Commander Thane says I am losing my discipline, that I am becoming too emotional." "Is that such a bad thing?" Jake asked. "To my people, yes. Emotions are dangerous. They lead to chaos, they say. We must be controlled, logical, efficient. But you're not happy living that way." Lyra's patterns flared bright white. "No, I am not happy. I have never been happy. But I did not know that until I met you. You showed me that life could be different." Jake turned to face her fully. "Then don't let them take that away from you. It is not that simple. I have responsibilities to my people. I cannot just reject everything I was taught." "Why not?" Jake's voice was passionate now. "Why can't you choose for yourself what makes you happy? Why do their rules matter more than your feelings? Because that is how my culture works. The individual serves the collective. Personal desires are secondary. That's not fair to you. Perhaps not. But it is reality." Over the next few days, Jake watched Lyra withdraw. She stopped coming to the observation deck. When Jake saw her in the hallways, she looked away. Her patterns were always dark, carefully controlled. She was trying to be a proper Vareth again, and it was killing something inside her. Jake could see it. He talked to Kel about it. The archivist listened patiently with all forearms folded. "The Vareth have lived this way for thousands of years," Kel said. "Change does not come easily to them." "But Lyra was changing," Jake said. "She was becoming happier, more open, and they're crushing that because it doesn't fit their rules." Yes, that is often how cultures respond to deviation. They see it as a threat. It's wrong. Many things are wrong, my friend. That does not mean they are easily fixed. Jake couldn't accept that. He couldn't just watch Lyra be forced back into a life that made her miserable. So he made a decision that was probably stupid but felt necessary. He requested a formal hearing with the Vareth delegation. He had no authority to do this, and Linda tried to talk him out of it. But Jake insisted, and eventually the Vareth agreed to meet with him. The hearing took place in the same conference room where the first meeting had happened. Commander Thane sat across from Jake, flanked by two other Vareth officials. Lyra was there too, sitting at the side of the room with her patterns carefully neutral. "You requested this meeting, Officer Morrison," Thane said. "State your purpose." Jake took a deep breath. "I want to challenge your decision to recall Lyra and to end our friendship." Thane's patterns darkened. "You have no authority to challenge our internal decisions." "Maybe not, but I have the right to speak, and I think you're wrong." "Explain." Jake stood up. He hadn't planned to, but the words were coming now, and he couldn't sit still. "You say emotions are dangerous, that they lead to chaos. But look at humanity. We're one of the most emotional species in the galaxy. We cry, we laugh, we get angry, we fall in love. And yes, sometimes it causes problems, but it also makes us strong. Emotion is weakness, one of the other officials said. No, Jake said firmly. Emotion is what drives us to explore, to create, to connect with others. You say the Vareth are advanced because you control your feelings. But I've read the statistics. Your people have the highest rates of isolation among all coalition species. Your psychological health indicators are terrible. You're not happy. Thane's patterns flashed red. Happiness is not the goal of existence. Order and efficiency are what matter. Why? Jake challenged. What's the point of existing if you're miserable? What's the point of efficiency if it doesn't lead to a better life? You are young and naive. You do not understand the complexity of maintaining a functioning society. Maybe I don't. But I understand that Lyra was happy when she could be herself. I understand that your rigid rules are crushing the life out of her. And I understand that, maybe, just maybe, humanity has something to teach you. The room was silent. Thane stared at Jake with an unreadable expression. The other officials' patterns were flickering rapidly, like they didn't know how to process what Jake was saying. Then Lyra stood up. He is right, she said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. Her patterns were glowing bright white, cycling through every color. She was trembling, but her voice was steady. Officer Morrison is right about everything, Lyra continued. I have been unhappy my entire life. I thought that was normal, that everyone felt this emptiness inside, but then I met Jake and he showed me that life could be different, that I could express what I feel, that I could connect with someone honestly. And for the first time, I felt alive. Lyra. Thane said warningly. No, Lyra said, her voice stronger now. I am tired of following rules that make me miserable. I am tired of pretending I do not feel things. I am tired of being alone. You are being emotional, the other official said. Yes, Lyra said simply. I am being emotional, and it feels right. The silence in the room was absolute. Lyra stood there, patterns blazing with colors Jake had never seen before. She looked terrified but determined. Commander Thane stared at her with an expression that might have been shock. Lyra, Thane said slowly, you do not know what you are saying. You are confused, influenced by human emotionalism. I am not confused, Lyra said. For the first time in my life, I am clear. I have spent my whole life following rules that tell me to suppress who I am. Rules that say feelings are dangerous, that personal connections are frivolous, that efficiency matters more than happiness. But those rules are wrong. One of the other officials stood up angrily. This is exactly what we feared. The human has corrupted you. Jake did not corrupt me, Lyra said. He showed me kindness. He treated me like a person, not a function. He made me realize that I deserve to feel things, to want things, to be happy. Jake watched this unfold with a mixture of pride and worry. Lyra was being so brave, but he was afraid of what it would cost her. Thane was quiet for a long moment. His pattern cycled through several colors, finally settling on a dark purple Jake hadn't seen before. When he spoke, his voice was different, softer somehow. I felt the same way once, Thane said quietly. Everyone stared at him. The other officials looked shocked. When I was young, Thane continued, I met an alien from another species, a scientist. She was passionate about her work, always laughing, always full of energy. I was fascinated by her. For a brief time, I felt what you are feeling now, Lyra. I felt alive. What happened? Lyra asked. I followed the rules. I let her go. I returned to my duties and spent the rest of my life serving our people with discipline and logic. Thane's patterns darkened. I have often wondered if I made the right choice. The admission hung in the air. Jake could see the other Vareth officials shifting uncomfortably. This was not how their commander was supposed to speak. I am not the only one, Thane continued. Many of our people feel this way. We are isolated, alone, efficient but empty. We have built a culture that prizes order above all else, and in doing so, we have forgotten how to live. Commander, one of the officials protested. This is inappropriate. No, Thane said firmly. What is inappropriate is forcing our people to live half-lives. What is inappropriate is crushing any spark of genuine feeling because it does not fit our rigid structure. He turned to Lyra. You are braver than I was. Lyra's patterns brightened. What are you saying? I am saying that perhaps it is time for things to change. Not just for you, but for all of us. The meeting ended with an unexpected decision. The Vareth delegation would not recall Lyra. Instead, they would report back to the High Council with a recommendation for a cultural exchange program. Young Vareth, who wished to experience other cultures, would be allowed to do so, without shame or punishment. It was a small step, but it was a beginning. After the meeting, Jake and Lyra walked to the observation deck together. They stood by the windows in comfortable silence for a while. Thank you, Lyra said finally, for standing up for me, for showing me that life could be different. You were the one who was brave, Jake said. I just gave a speech. You actually stood up to your entire culture. I could not have done it without you. Lyra's patterns shifted to a warm gold. Jake, I need to tell you something. When you first complimented my patterns, I thought you were declaring romantic interest. The meeting clarified that you were not. But now, she paused. Now I wish you had been. Jake's heart skipped. Lyra, I know this is complicated. We are different species. Our cultures are incompatible in many ways, but these weeks with you have been the best of my life. You make me feel understood. You make me feel like I matter. Jake took her hand carefully. Her skin was warm and smooth, the patterns glowing brighter at his touch. I feel the same way, Jake admitted. I didn't understand it at first. I thought we were just friends. But somewhere along the way it became more than that. So what do we do? Lyra asked. I don't know. Figure it out as we go, I guess. That's kind of the human way. Lyra smiled, that strange but genuine expression she'd learned from watching humans. I like the human way. Word of what happened spread through the station quickly. Other Vareth approached Lyra, asking questions about emotions, about human culture, about how to express feelings they'd suppressed for years. She became an unofficial ambassador, helping her people understand that there were other ways to live. Commander Thane followed through on his promise. The cultural exchange program was approved by the Vareth High Council, though with many restrictions. Young Vareth could apply to spend time on other worlds, learning from other species. It would be voluntary and carefully monitored, but it was a chance for change. More importantly, the story reached beyond the Varath. Other emotionally reserved species in the coalition heard about the human who'd sparked a cultural revolution with a simple compliment. They became curious about humanity's emotional openness, about this species that wore its heart on its sleeve. Delegations started arriving at Horizon 7, asking to meet with humans to understand their culture. Jake found himself giving presentations about human emotions, about how feelings weren't weakness but strength. Linda promoted him, making him the head of a new cultural understanding program. But the biggest change was personal. Jake and Lyra continued spending time together, and their relationship deepened. It wasn't always easy. They came from different worlds with different customs. Lyra had to learn to express her feelings openly, while Jake had to learn when to give her space to process things quietly. But they made it work because they both wanted to. 6 months after that first compliment, Jake and Lyra stood in the observation deck again. It had become their special place where they'd first really talked, where their friendship had grown into something more. Lyra's patterns were glowing with warm colors, shifting between gold and purple and soft blue. She'd learned to control them less, to let them express what she felt naturally. It made her more beautiful than ever. I never thanked you properly, Lyra said. For what? For that first compliment? For saying my patterns were beautiful. It changed everything. Jake smiled. You know what? You're still the most beautiful person on this station. Lyra's patterns flared bright, but this time she didn't freeze or run away. She moved closer to him, her hand finding his. Thank you, she said softly. Then in slightly accented English she'd been practicing. You are pretty wonderful yourself. Jake laughed. Your English is getting better. I have a good teacher. They stood there together looking out at the stars. Behind them the station hummed with activity. Different species moved through the corridors, learning from each other, building connections across the void of space, and somewhere, a young Vareth engineer was filling out an application for the cultural exchange program, inspired by Lyra's courage. Somewhere, a human diplomat was explaining to a curious alien why humans cry at sad movies. Somewhere walls between cultures were coming down, one small connection at a time. It had all started with a simple compliment. A moment of human warmth and honesty. Jake had just been trying to be friendly, to start a conversation. He couldn't have known it would change everything, but that was the thing about humans. They connected. They reached out. They spoke their hearts freely, even when it was scary, even when they didn't know the rules. And sometimes that made all the difference. What are you thinking about? Lyra asked. Just how lucky I am, Jake said. That you didn't understand human compliments. That we got to know each other. That everything worked out. It almost did not work out. We could have just apologized and never spoken again. But we didn't. You came to find me in the observation deck. You were brave enough to be curious. And you were brave enough to challenge my people's entire culture. Jake shrugged. Someone had to. Besides, I had good motivation. I couldn't stand watching you be unhappy. Lyra's patterns glowed even brighter. She leaned her head against his shoulder, a gesture of affection she'd learned from him. I am not unhappy anymore. Good, Jake said. That's all I ever wanted. They stood there together as the station rotated, watching the stars wheel past the windows. Two people from different worlds, building something new together. It wasn't traditional by either of their culture's standards, but it was real and it was theirs. And in the end, that was what mattered most.